In this tutorial, we'll be making an elastic waistband with drawstrings for a shirt. So I measured the waist and I have 53 inches width. And I have this piece of fabric which is 5 inches height, making it unfold to be 2.5 inches. And the length of it is that 53.5 inches plus 1 inch, that's 54.5 inches. So then I'll make this into a fold and bring the two separate parts together. With 1/2 inch, I will have to sew this. I'll connect the dot and then I'll measure 1 inch. That's where I will sew and stop stitch. I'll skip 3/4 of an inch. That's where the drawstring will come out through. And then the rest I'll be sewing to the end. So here on the sewing machine, I am sewing that 1 inch and skipping that 3/4 of an inch and then sew it all the way to the end. Iron it open, and that's the hole through which the drawstring will come out. Now the hole will have to face the front of this shirt, and so I made the band to go around the waist, and I'll be using 1/2 inch to sew this from one spot to the next. I'll sew it all the way around using 1/2 of an inch, and then I'll fold the other edge with 1/2 of an inch and then make it into a fold like this. So taking it to the ironing board, I iron it inwards and I fold it like I said. Now that's the hole and that's the front of the shirt, and then I fold it like this. So I'll make it to cover the stitch line, that threading that we have from the 1/2 inch that we sew already. I'll make it a little further than that threading line, and then I'll make this all the way around the waist of this shirt, pinning it together. Now you need to work with your pins while sewing, so I'll pin it all the way around, and then at this point I will sew it through that threading line. You see, through that threading line, just to give it a neat look. Okay, I won't want the threading to be too much because already I'll be threading on the elastic. So I follow that space, that in between space where I join the band to the shirt. That's exactly the point I am sewing. So you just take it carefully and slowly. I'll sew it in a cyclic way. From that point, I'll sew it round to that point again. Now I'll leave about 3 inches before that point so that I can pass the elastic. Sewing this, I'll have about 2 inches, for the band. Now the elastic I'm working with is 1 inch 7/8. You understand? So it will fit into this perfectly. Now I sew this from that spot that I started to about 3 inches before that spot. I'll be using that 3 inches to pass the elastic, and then I'll give it a good press. Now that's what it looks like, and this is the 3 inches that I left for the elastic. So like I said, I'm using this elastic which is about 1¾ inches, and then I'll measure the length of it. I'll measure the length of my waist minus 1 inch, and that's 35 inches for me. My waist measurement is 36 and I'm using 35 for this. So I'll be using this safety pin to pass it through that 3 inches hole that I kept. Now I'll tuck it in like this and be drawing it from the other end. You need to be sure when you're putting this elastic, you need to arrange it properly so it will not squeeze or twist. So you need to take your time to do this. See the way I was trying to arrange it. Each time I'm pulling it, I need to arrange it to make it flat. Now, if you don't want it this very tight, you can make the height of your band like 5.5 inches so you have enough space, but I just like it to look tight, so I pulled it through and I pin the elastic, so I will not draw in everything. That will be like double work. So I pin it to one spot and then I'm pushing this one all the way round the waistband, arranging it properly as I go, and I brought it out at that space again. So I brought the two edges together and I'll be top stitching from the top to the end like 2 or 3 times just to make it firm. Clean the edges and I'll be pulling like this and pushing the elastic inwards. And then I made it like this. So I'll be closing that hole, okay? I'll be closing that hole. So after pushing it inwards and arranging it properly, I'll make sure I am sewing, closing that hole and making sure that I do not sew it on the elastic. After sewing that, after closing that hole, you can give it a good press at this point. Now note the opening that I have on the band, on the front of the band, that hole that I said the drawstrings will come out from. Remember, I stop stitch after the hole and before the hole. So at that point of the first stop stitch, towards the top part, I'm using 1/2 inch. Okay, so I'm using 1/2 inch at the top there, and I'll sew it all the way round the waistband. So I'll sew it to meet the point that I started, and that's the first. And now remember the second one, the 1/2 inch above the joining to the waistband, leaving that 3/4 space for the drawstring. So I sew this other half, the second half that I'm taking from that point, and I'll sew it all the way around the waistband to that point that I started. And so we have the space in between for our drawstring. Always ensure to cut out whatever remains of the thread that you have after sewing. So that's the hole. And for the drawstring, I'll be using this strip of fabric that is 1¼ inch wide, and I folded it 1/2 inch at the top edge there and 1/4 inch on both sides, and then place it on fold like this. I'll close up the top edge and then take it the length of this, folding it into halves like I did, all the way to the end of the strip. Now the length of the strip is my waist circumference multiplied by 2. So 36 plus 36, that's 72 inches, okay? So I close it like this, and this is it. So I'll give it a good press, okay? And then I will use this safety pin to push it through that, that space we kept for the drawstring. Then as you're tucking it in, you're pulling it the other side, this other way. You tuck it in and you pull it. That's how you pass the drawstring through the waistband. I'm doing it round the waistband, and I brought it out through the same hole that I pushed it in. Now I'm being careful to draw this out because of the knob that we have of the drawstring. So I had to just be careful to bring it out. So we have the second end of the drawstring out. And our waistband is ready. If this tutorial adds any value to you at all, give me a thumbs up, like and leave a comment for me in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. And if you would like to have a tutorial on how to make this short, leave a comment for me in the comment section. Bye.